with Iowa Rivers Revival, and I'm Rosalyn Lehman. I'm the executive director. So thank you for spending your lunch with me today to learn a little bit about what our organization does and what some of the projects that we're working on right now. We are a statewide river advocacy and education organization, and our focus is protecting Iowa's rivers and streams. And the organization mission is to help Iowans restore, protect, and enjoy our rivers. We look at our organization as being a voice for Iowa's rivers. Rivers really can't speak for themselves, so we are here to advocate on behalf of their needs and in protecting them. So as an organization, we were established in 2007, and we've been working to talk with individuals, communities, organizations, and policy leaders about river awareness, responsibility, and enjoyment in an effort to improve and enhance the condition of Iowa's rivers and streams. And these next few slides, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the programs that we do each year or throughout the year. And we give an award every year to a town, and it's called the River Town of the Year Award. And it's recognizing communities that have led the way in protecting and embracing their local rivers while recognizing the importance of that river to their community. So the recreational value, the economic value, the environmental value. We look at a bunch of different things when it comes to who we're choosing to get this award each year. I did bring some handouts with me. One of them is an overview of the different communities that have received our River Town of the Year Award. And this year we just named Decorah the River Town of the Year Award. And I don't know if any of you are aware of the Upper Iowa River, but that's a really, really pretty river. And I think it's one of Iowa's gems when it comes to water quality, just a really scenic, beautiful river to be on in the state of Iowa. Some quick examples of why we chose Decorah is their expansion and efforts into the Trout Run Trail. There is the Upper Iowa River Watershed Project, so it's a collaboration of organizations and individuals and agencies working together in the watershed to protect the river, as well as ensure good quality water quality. The students in the community are at every level engaging with the river. So there's programs K through 12 that bring the kids out to the river. They have Luther College is up there, and they have programs that connect the folks to the river, connect students to the rivers through projects up there. So it's more than just like the County Conservation Board, the DNR. Everybody's committed into making sure that the Upper Iowa River is protected, and it continues to be one of these quality resources that people come back to year after year. Some of the past winners that have also received the award was last year we honored Dubuque with the efforts that they're doing on the Mississippi River. There's a huge undertaking of just focusing on the river there, where probably 10 years ago you would have went up there and there wasn't anything drawing you to the river. So there's just a really beautiful port up there. They've done the Mississippi River Museum. So really a good place to go check out the river and its tributaries up near Dubuque. We've also named Central City. Charles City, a couple years ago, they took out and they modified a lowhead dam within their community, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with what lowhead dams are. We have a couple of them downtown in the Des Moines River. They're really dangerous, and we describe them as killing machines. If you're caught in a lowhead dam, you aren't probably going to get out of one alive. So one of the focuses of our organization is to raise awareness about them, and we would love to see the rivers in Iowa to either remove them or modify these dams to make it more safe and accessible to be out on the rivers. So Charles City was the first city in Iowa to modify their lowhead dam and create a whitewater park. So folks have been coming all across the country as well as the world to visit this whitewater park up in Charles City. Anybody can use it, from a toddler all the way to a senior citizen. People can get out on tubes, kayaks. They can just walk out into the river, whereas before it was center of their community. They couldn't use it because of that dangerous Lowhead Dam. So we really like to feature that and let people know that that's out there. And then we've also recognized Coon Rapids, Elkader, Webster City, and Cedar Falls. And if you wanted more information about that, there's a handout over there. Another program that we are very excited about is our Master River Stewards program. And I'm not sure how many of you have heard of like the Master Gardeners program, the Master Conservationist program. So we've modeled our Master River Stewards program off of that concept, which is an 8-week comprehensive course related to rivers. So each session could it changes depending on who the instructor is, but in general, you would be taking this course and you would get some instruction on watershed awareness, actually paddling and navigating skills. So one Saturday, folks actually learn about paddling, get out there and spend a day on the river. River and stream dynamics, aquatic habitat, water quality, and water monitoring. The state of Iowa has a Iowa Water Monitor. It's called Iowa Water, and it's a water monitoring program, and it's all volunteer based. And so folks all across the state are monitoring local creeks, rivers, whatever it is that they have an interest in, and they are collecting data and doing this on a regular basis. So in a lot of situations, Iowa wouldn't have information about our water quality if it wasn't for the Iowa Water Program and the information that they're collecting. So we teach people about that and how to actually monitor water. And then we talk about policies related to rivers and water quality. And then after this 8-week course is over, people break out into small groups depending on where they are from, and they do a project in their community. So it could be a river cleanup, it could be a presentation. It just depends on whatever moves them to kind of get their community educated, aware of, and embracing their river and their water resources. This is the 3rd year that we've offered the Master River Stewards program. The first 2 years, we did one up in the Ames area the first year. The 2nd year, we were more down here in Des Moines. And now this year, they just wrapped up the program, and it was in Johnson County on the Iowa River. So the goal of Master River Stewards too is to broaden the experts, the people that are interested in advocating about Iowa's rivers. It's important, one, to protect that resource within their community, so to get folks involved locally, but at the same time, we need folks also advocating with their local policy leaders, so whether it's the mayor, the council, their state representatives and senators, to talk about rivers. We hear time and time again from our legislators that they don't hear from folks that care about the environment nearly as much as, let's say, the folks on the other side of those issues, which maybe would be people that are actually polluting our rivers and using the rivers for their their business gain. So the goal is to grow Iowa's river advocates and river supporters. So each one of these programs, we probably train 20 to 25 people, and at that rate, it's going to take forever to grow a statewide organization and advocates. So this summer, or this fall, we're going to be offering a program called Train the Trainer. So we'll be working with other folks across the state to deliver this program more often in a broader sense. So that will be a way, so we will be kind of letting go of the training aspect of it and overseeing the program, but also hoping to see it be delivered in more communities across the state. So we're excited about that. Another program that we've been running since 2008 is our River Rascals program, which is locally focused here in the Des Moines area. One of my board members, Robin Fortney, she also started the Central Iowa Paddlers. It's a recreational paddling group here in Iowa that's been going on maybe for 20 years. She has taken this program and kind of made it her own, and she works with the Children and Family Urban Ministries, but now it's called The Movement. It's down on 6th Avenue in downtown Des Moines. So we're providing, it's kind of like the Master River Stewards. We're giving these 10 kids an overview of river issues, how they impact water, how water is impacted every day by our uses of it. So whether it's what's going down the drain, what's on the roads that is rushing into the rivers when it's raining. So just getting them thinking about how we interact with rivers every day, but also giving them an opportunity to go out and actually get on moving water. These are underprivileged kids who probably would never have had this experience if it wasn't for River Rascals. And we also believe that You introduce kids to something like this at their age. This is something that they will take with them and hold with them for the rest of their lives. So in essence, we're kind of we are fostering that stewardship for, as they move into adults. So some of the things they learn, we talk about the watershed, we talk about river biology, we talk about river values and water quality issues. We teach them how to paddle. We teach them how to be safe on the rivers. We teach them about river etiquette. You're not just tossing whatever you have out into the river, and you think about what's around you and if you can help, pick up the garbage and then the recreational opportunities. So it's a program that we're trying to expand. We've been writing grants to kind of create a guidebook to be able to offer this to other communities. It would be hard for us to be out delivering this in different communities. The advantage of having Robin run this is she trusts the adults that are volunteering in this program to be in boats with kids. So that's the real safety issue is you just couldn't call any old volunteer up and say, hey, come get out on a boat. You want to be sure that they know what they're doing and you can trust their skill level. So we would like to expand it by just kind of taking what this program has become, putting it in kind of a manual and offering that to different communities. So that's our River Rascals program. And over the years, we've offered different programs just to talk about some of the things we're working on, whether it's legislatively or just connecting people to rivers. So we've done river currents, which are more just mini little conference seminar type things where we'll bring in a panel for the day and just talk about an issue, one of them being dams and dam safety, options for removing dams, modifying them. So that's an example of what one of those programs might look like. And then in the past, we've also conducted river currents where we've worked with different folks in different communities to pull together a full day on the river. So it would include programs about what is happening on the river in their community. So the general public could learn a little bit more and kind of connect to that resource. We would provide donated canoes, in-kind canoes, for folks to be able to get on the river and just experience that with people who know what they're doing, and then maybe a meal or music. So it's just a full day, just kind of like festival-y, kind of just embracing that local river. And then really in the way past, we did annual conferences, and we've kind of steered away from doing that because huge investment, and we were kind of seeing the same folks every place we were going, which isn't a bad thing, but at the same time, the conference was an effort to pull new people in and grow our constituency. So for what we were spending on it, we weren't getting the turnaround in what we were. So we've moved away, done more of these mini sessions, really focused on the Master River Steward stuff and our policy work. So and then that leads me to our legislative activities. For the last 4 years now, we have had a lobbyist up at the State House representing us. I am a part-time executive director and I have a part-time assistant, so it would be very hard for me to spend day after day during session at the State House and at the same time be able to do my regular duties. So it's been very advantageous of having a lobbyist up there, but at the same time I mentioned how legislators say they're not hearing about our issues from constituents or even from organizations such as our Iowa Rivers Revival. So it's giving us a presence, it's giving Rivers a presence at the State House, and we have been able to do a lot since we've had a lobbyist at the State House. The last 3 years, we've been successful in maintaining funding for the DNR's Lowhead Dam Modification and Water Trails program. 2012 and 13, we kept it at $1 million, and then just this recent session, it was up to $2 million. So the DNR can't advocate for their own programs. If it wasn't for Iowa Rivers Revival, this program would no longer be funded through the Rebuild Iowa Infrastructure Fund. So it's just an example of how this nonprofit kind of outside of the agency world has influenced the continuation of this program. And then there's a lot of other things that we've stopped the movement of the water quality monitoring program out of the DNR from moving it into the Department of Agriculture. We felt that that was a conflict of interest because we know that agriculture is has a huge impact on our water quality, so it didn't make sense for us to see them actually monitoring water quality at that time. So that was one thing we were able to raise awareness of and stopped. It was something that was kind of happening under the table. So if an organization like ours didn't exist, it probably would have happened, and there wouldn't have been, people really wouldn't have known about it. Lake Delhi, I don't know how many of you guys are aware of the Maquoketa River and the Lake Delhi Dam that 3 years ago had breached, and so literally the lake had ended up moving into the communities down below them. So the dam broke, the lake was gone, and for us as a river organization, we saw that as an opportunity to not put the dam back and to let the river be a river. One of the problems with Lake Delhi was it silts in because of the watershed that it exists in, so it continuously fills in with dirt. So we were concerned that the state was being asked to provide $5 million to rebuild this dam, when in fact it's going to have to be dredged very frequently in order to maintain that recreational aspect. But at the same time, we learned that some of the homes around the lake were directly discharging their sewer into the lake, so there was they were swimming in their own, So that was an issue. The fact that public dollars were going to be spent on rebuilding this dam and that it was a private lake, that was also a concern of ours. And then any dam built in the state of Iowa should make provisions for fish passage, and that's a biological and habitat issue. And this was something that was being overlooked in the rebuilding of this dam. So these were some of the concerns that we were able to raise with the legislature. And in turn, they went back to the community and said, these are some things that you need to address. Ultimately, they got their $5 million, but they did have to do a survey of all the homes around the lake to ensure that they had a septic system, they weren't discharging into the lake. The fish passage aspect was something that is not going to be enforced on this actual dam. And then the public access. So we don't believe that there will be much more public access, but we were told that they were going to put in a few parking lots down the road. They were going to look at getting some grant funding to do some of that work. So it was just an opportunity for us to say, hey, this is public funding going to a private project, but at the same time, after 100 years, maybe we could look at the river being a river again, because ultimately that's what we would like to see in the state, is Iowa's rivers being free-flowing rivers without those impediments. So just giving you kind of an example of some of the things that we have been able to do up at the State House. Currently, we are working on establishing a river restoration program in the state of Iowa. So that's where a lot of our focus is going to when it comes to the legislature. And in the 2013 session, we were able to work with House and Senate and bipartisan leadership to establish an interim committee to look at the need and importance of having a river restoration program in Iowa. And we were fortunate to have had that committee convened, and they met last December for a full day of presentations from people from the Department of Ag, people from the DNR, environmental organizations like myself, and then folks that have actually done river restoration projects on their property. So it was just a range of different presentations to talk about the benefits and the importance of river restoration. So what have we been doing regarding river restoration at this point? We did have the interim committee. They came back and met in January to kind of summarize what they learned in December. And our focuses during the session was to see $1 million to be put towards establishing a plan. So building criteria, guidelines, what it is that you would actually do for river restoration, so guidance. There isn't anything like that in Iowa. And I'm going to show you some pictures in a second, but just to give you a picture, we see folks rip-wrapping, concrete lining our riverbanks to try to preserve the riverbanks because they are getting cut away. We are losing our land into the rivers. So we're seeing folks just, it's a quick Band-Aid. Let's throw some concrete against the side of the river. But then looking at the whole picture, how is that concrete impacting the overall biological, the habitat issues related to the river, the aesthetic value, and is it really fixing the problem? It's very expensive, and one huge rain event, flood event could come in and wipe all of that out, and you've lost that investment, but at the same time you've lost more land and you're really not addressing the problem. And honestly, that's what the river needs, more room versus trying to build up walls to contain that water. So right now we've been working with the legislature to kind of raise awareness about the need and the importance. Unfortunately, we weren't successful in getting the $1 million to focus on developing that program and to do some demonstration projects. But as I mentioned earlier, the Lowhead Dam Mitigation and Water Trails program got an extra $1 million. So it was kind of like that. Instead of getting the river restoration money, that extra $1 million went into that program. And they are doing some of that work, but it's not because we didn't add river restoration to the focus of that program. There's definitely parameters on what that program can actually do within the DNR. So we have our work to do. It would have been, wow, we were successful in our whole effort in 1 year. That would have been huge and almost unbelievable. So it's okay. We're okay with kind of restructuring and refocusing and moving forward and doing our work to raise awareness in the public as well as with our legislature. In February, we were awarded a $80,000 grant for 2 years through the McKnight Foundation out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, to raise awareness about, do outreach about river restoration, and then also provide some technical training about river restoration techniques to the professionals in the field. So most likely engineers, landowners, county conservation boards, folks that are actually out there in the field doing this type of work. So through that, we've been working to develop a public outreach campaign. We're doing these trainings, we're developing partnerships, and we ultimately would like to see a framework for river restoration program. So that would be able to set priorities in the state that says this is where we need to put our time and energy. This is where your dollars will do the best work at this particular time. So we're a year into that right now, and we're doing quite a bit based on the capacity that I kind of talked about. Going back to the interim committee, this is just a picture from that day, and it was a really successful day. The interim committee did bipartisan and unanimously vote to support efforts to establish a river restoration program in Iowa. And as I said, unfortunately, we did not see that happen in the legislature this year. So it was kind of like the interim committee came out and said, yes, support it, go. And then when it came to the overall support within the legislature, that didn't happen. And there are just several different reasons why that could. Other legislative issues impending upon that. Maybe this wasn't the time to kind of initiate and establish a new program within a state agency when the governor and legislature is trying to be mindful when it comes to budgeting issues. So, but like I said, we're continuing to work on those efforts. So, what is river restoration? And that's kind of what I want to get into because this is kind of what we're focusing on right now. And just to reiterate, it's a framework for targeted restoration, preservation, enhancement, and the beneficial use of rivers. And what can river restoration do? So what would a program like this help do? And as I mentioned, the riverbank and riverbed stabilization. And so I'm kind of speaking generally. So at any time, just if you want to know more about a certain topic, just raise your hand, and because I don't want to assume that you guys understand this, but I also don't want to spend a long time trying to go in and really over-explain everything. So the riverbank and riverbed stabilization. Iowa agricultural land. Our landscape, we have like 2% of public land in the state of Iowa. The rest is private land. And we have millions and millions of miles of tile line in our agricultural land. And so that's taking the water off the land faster than it ever has before, and especially in extreme rain events. And it's creating these flashy flood events. So the water's becoming way more mighty, the way I like to describe it, and it is cutting the banks. It's cutting away the land. So that's one way of addressing those situations, instead of kind of throwing your hands up and saying, what can we do? But also looking at different practices that helps the water absorb into the landscape versus rushing it off the land as fast as we can for the agricultural purposes. Reshaping riverbanks, it's been a general practice in the state of Iowa, not just agricultural, but it has been primarily agriculture, is straightening our streams, which has also had an impact on these cut banks. And so rivers want to meander. They kind of just the lazy little rolling river. Well, a lot of our rivers have been straightened for the purpose of agriculture. So we'd love to see the natural shape of the river restored, modifying old and unused dams, improving habitat. So that goes all the way of in-stream habitat as well as around the rivers. I worked on the I Will campaign for 3 years, and that's the Natural Resources and Outdoor Recreational Trust Fund, which was a ballot measure that Iowans passed in 2010 to create a constitutionally protected fund for natural rivers, or for natural resources in Iowa. And through that process, we just learned how Iowa's natural habitat and the animals that live within that habitat are just declining at such a rate that where we say pheasant hunters would come from all around to come to Iowa for that as a recreational opportunity, it doesn't exist anymore. They're going to different states. And it's just, that's another example of why we need to focus on improving the habitat and looking at this from a holistic perspective. And then the program itself would be looking how assessing streams for the best possible approach for that stream, because river restoration isn't a one size practice fits all. It's definitely diverse, and you have to look at the issues from upstream, downstream, and actually where the problem is happening. So, and why do we want to restore Iowa's rivers? So that's kind of reiterating, we're losing banks. The DOT has a responsibility through the Clean Water Act, federal law, that says for every bridge or road that they are building and that would impact a river or a stream, they have to somewhere mitigate that impact by putting resources back into repairing a segment of river or stream. So the DOT has millions of dollars available to them every year to do stream mitigation. And they would greatly benefit from a plan that says this is where your dollars would best be spent. Right now, they're just having to dump money because they have to dump money by law, and it might not be doing really any overall good. So that would be one benefit of having a program and restoring rivers. Reducing flood and mitigating flood effects. Giving the river a floodplain, giving the river space to kind of get out of its banks and then recede back in. That's where it comes into, like, we don't want to just build walls up and push the river out. We want to be able to give it the space that they need. And that also, you can look at that from an urban perspective. I mean, we shouldn't be building in a floodplain and then every 2, 4, 5 years, 10 years, people are, up in arms, oh, my property flooded again. Maybe we should be looking at the river in the sense that this is where the river needs to go. We need to give river space. So looking at it from that perspective, improving water quality, so allowing water to retain on the landscape helps filter it versus rushing it off the landscape when it's carrying nutrient pollution with it when it is rushing off the landscape. Providing better fish and aquatic life, providing a better wildlife habitat in the greenbelt. And then when you're addressing all of these things when it comes to the river, you're also improving the economic development within the community. People want to come to your community and use your river, kind of like I described the Charles City, the Whitewater Park that they developed. They're starting to track numbers now just to see how that project alone is impacting their community. So creating a place for folks to come and enjoy the natural outdoors is definitely an advantage for a local community. So here's an example of what I would call a cut bank. And here's an example of the river restoration project that came in afterwards. So it's giving what we call them two-stage ditches. So you have your water level, and then you give, it's like a step up, and then you kind of pare it back out and you have another step up. So it gives the river that floodplain that it needs. The river has to flood out. It's kind of like it's replenishing itself when it gets up and out of its banks. So this is just a good example of seeing how the natural habitat is coming back in there, and it's also preserving that landscape from continuing to move further back. And this is a good example of the two-stage ditches. So this has definitely been a straightened channel, and you can see kind of how it's tapered up, and then that's giving that little stream the opportunity to flood out. And because most of the time it looks like that, but in an extreme rain event, it's going to definitely, if it wasn't for the two-stage ditch, it's going to have that fast, hard-moving water. It's going to cut into the side of those banks and continue to erode the stream bank. Here, it's able to come up and out and soak back into the landscape. Just kind of recap who can benefit from river restoration. Obviously, landowners and farmers, paddlers, anglers, anybody that wants to recreate out on Iowa's rivers. Local communities, both from the economic development perspective, but at the same time, the community being able to embrace it and not always having to look at it from this problem that's coming to flood them out, or how can we work within the framework of the river being a centerpiece in that community, and not trying to put up levees and keep the river out of the community. Natural resource management professionals, so folks that are out there actually dealing with these river issues on a daily basis. It gives them the resources and tools to look at alternatives to what they've been doing in the past. And then our municipalities, water treatment and consumption facilities. And so we're close to wrapping up. What can you do is get involved locally. So do you know what your local river or stream is? We all have them near us, and oftentimes we find ourselves driving over bridges and not really even realizing what's under the bridge that we're driving under. So it's just kind of just familiarizing yourself with your own resource. Last week I was able to, in learning more about these river restoration projects in the state, we have some here in the metro that I wasn't even aware of until recently. The city of Clive has 2 projects on the river ground, and also one in the process of being developed this fall. And these natural aesthetic, these comprehensive holistic projects right here on and Little Walnut Creek. So it was really nice to be able to go out and actually see something happening right here. And here I am, a river organization, and I'm not even aware of what's happening right here around me as well as around the state. So it's an opportunity for me to connect with people that are doing the work and learning more about these processes. I did bring a sign-up sheet, so if you're a river person, you want to stay connected about what we're doing at the legislature, or when we're offering programs, or when there are other things happening around the state that are river related. A good way to stay connected to that is through our newsletter. There's another statewide kind of newsletter tool. It's called the Iowa Water Trails Association newsletter, and that's kind of being facilitated out of that Water Trails program in the DNR. They are setting up we have state designated water trails all across the state. And on those designated water trails, they're starting to set up multiple programs each season. So folks, if you're not a paddler, there's still programs that will get you out and near the river to give you a better sense of what's this river entails, or what this landscape and what the water trail is. And so that's another newsletter that you could sign up to stay kind of connected. And those are more hands-on actual programs and projects. Communicating with your state and local, with your fed, or any of your elected officials. It can seem intimidating to say, oh my gosh, talking to our legislators, but even shooting them an email at the beginning of session or right now saying, why are rivers important to you, or just water quality alone. Last year, we heard a lot about the nitrates in the Des Moines and Raccoon River, and how, we needed to be careful about drinking the water. However, the water was safe due to, the great facility that we have at the Des Moines Water Works. But at the same time, they weren't able to use the water in our rivers. They had to use their overflow facilities because of the high nitrate levels in our rivers. So it's how are things like that ever going to change unless people like us start saying, this is important to us. And we all know it is important to us, but our everyday lives tend to take over, and it's hard. It definitely is hard to find the time to make the contact. But it really does make a difference. Sometimes if a legislator gets 2 emails on an issue, especially like ours, that's a lot for them to get something like that. Whereas, on the other side, or maybe an education issue or a healthcare issue, they're going to get bombarded by both sides and tons of emails. So to see something from an environmental group or specifically focused on a resource like rivers, it really does make a huge impact. Become a river advocate in your own community. Again, it's kind of getting involved locally, talking to your mayor, talking to your city council, asking what are we doing here on our stream here? What are we doing to protect our river? Or the next time a major event happens and a flood happens, so can we look at alternatives, or do we want to keep doing business as usual? So just using our voice, talking a little bit more about what's important to us. And we are a nonprofit organization. We are almost 100% funded by private donations. However, I did mention that McKnight grant that we recently received, which has been a huge boost to the work that we're doing, and it's kind of helping us build upon the successes that we have achieved over the last 7 years. Again, we're a very young organization, but we've got a lot done in 7 years, and with part-time staff, so it's definitely, we have a lot of support behind us. And so that's really what I came to talk to you guys about today. I brought materials that talk more in depth about our river restoration process, our legislative priorities, a comprehensive sheet that talks about all the programs that I mentioned, and then the River Town of the Year. So that's really what I have for you. Hopefully you found it interesting, and any questions or? Well, we're not focused we focus mostly on the interior rivers in Iowa because the Missouri and the Mississippi are so huge, and they are multi-state. So there's watershed authorities that are, so there are different states that are involved in looking at the issues from that perspective. So we're not necessarily looking at the Mississippi, but let me also, this focus of the McKnight grant is both to do the outreach and the technical trainings, but the caveat also as a part of this grant, and McKnight focuses on reducing nutrient pollution in the Mississippi River, which is ultimately creating the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So one of the focuses of us doing this outreach and education about river restoration practices is that it can help decrease nutrient pollution in the rivers. So that would be one way that we would be impacting Mississippi River issues, is by focusing on cleaning up our rivers on the interior side. Because if the rivers are clean here, then the water going into the Mississippi is definitely going to be improved. And then the Missouri is a whole different problem, let me say. It's been a scoured channel. So the Missouri is much different than the Mississippi, but it's being maintained for barge traffic that really doesn't exist on the Missouri River, but due to federal regulations, due to barging industries down in St. Louis or in Kansas and in Missouri, it's all these political parameters. But basically, the Missouri River is just this very fast-moving, muddy ditch, where the issues on the Mississippi have more to do with the nutrient pollution and how that's impacting communities clearly downstream. And that I kind of go back to the downstream thing. All of us are impacting the people below us. So it's kind of thinking about our everyday water uses and how we are impacting people. I mean, we do have an impact being urban folks. It's not just the farmers that are muddying up and polluting our rivers. We also have an impact here, and we have concrete everywhere, and concrete kind of serves as the tile line. So when the rain's hitting the water or the concrete, it's rushing into the stormwater sewers. Our sewers can't handle the amount of water that's being rushed into them, creating flooding events. Not to mention what's on the concrete that's being rushed into the storm sewers. Regular trash, but then gas, oil, whatever you could think of that's out there on the streets. So what are our everyday impacts, and how we could just, how we could look at it from a different perspective and maybe do our part in maintaining our little piece of the world. So the Mississippi's kind of, they have their group of folks working on that right now, and we're really focused on Iowa's rivers, because nobody's doing that right now. A lot of so the county conservation boards, they might go out and do things like that on programs when they're talking about different issues. As an organization, we don't focus on, because we are a statewide organization, so our focus isn't on particular monitoring aspects, but it would be to get folks the opportunity to learn how to become aware of those types of things. So no, we don't, but that's what Master River Stewards might do. Take you out there, show you what you're seeing in the river, and whether that means it's a healthy river, or if there's the absence of things, and then why is there the absence as well. So that's kind of how we're approaching that. Well, thank you guys for spending your lunch with me today, and if you want more information, just feel free to sign up, or if you want to ask me a question off to the side, I'll stick around for a few minutes. So thank you.